Hello everybody, and welcome to Autistic Radio. It's important for us to have meetings that we feel are public. When we are an autistic charity run by autistic people, it seems right for people to have access to the decision making in a very immediate way. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm telling you about what we're doing in Autistic Radio so that you can make decisions yourself on how you would like to influence us. There's a bit of big news. After a long time working on this, we have been invited by the UK Society for Behaviour Analysts, the people who are into PBS and behaviourism generally, to present at their conference. It's to me a bit like being the Trojan horse that sat outside the gates of the Citadel. We have been strategically making it possible for us as autistic people to speak there, to make it happen, to make it possible for us to put our point of view directly to them. Now, I know that some of you will feel rattled by this. It makes it easy for some autistic advocates who, for good reasons, have real difficulties with the behaviourist community to criticise and make Autistic Radio seem like we are being overtaken. But I want to assure you that we're not. We are independent. We are funded independently. And we think for ourselves. So, if there's something that you want me to say, I have left a big space in the written speech. That's for you to fill. What do you want to say to the behaviourists? Their conference is about addressing the issues of the past. I have been asked to talk about making sure that we are taken into consideration. Now, please don't just send me emails saying ban ABA. Contact me so that what you say can be heard right inside their organisation. Thank you. I know this is controversial, but it's one of the projects that we have been working on here at Autistic Radio. It's part of our advocacy. And now, for a bit of light relief, I hope, and also, as usual, a cornucopia of different things from Harry's Facebook. Hi Harry, are you ready to take the controls from me?
Yes, you can sit and relax now. I can take over. Thanks, Jules. Thanks for that. Good evening, everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 12th of January 2025, and this is where we share Facebook posts that's been shared on our Facebook page and have discussions based on the topics that are shared. So the first one is from Soulfully Neurodivergent, which is a personal blog, here to make connections with other people, AU, DHD, pansexual and gender fluid, pagan, happily married, just doing the best I can to learn and be a good person. And what they've shared is the following. I don't feel it is my place or any other autistic person's place to try and tell other autistic people how they should be referring to themselves. I do think we need to distinguish between what an individual autistic chooses to use for themselves and what the majority of autistic people prefer, though. What's your thoughts on that particular quote? I think this is in relation to what we've discussed in the past, where some people call themselves autistic, but other people call themselves with autism. And even those two differences alone can cause controversy or argument depending who you're talking to and who you're referring to. So I'm just wondering what other people's thoughts on this is. The next post is from Pandas Online, which is an author and promoting acceptance of neurodivergence and support based in the UK. And what they say, in a world that often measures us by neurotypical standards, it's empowering to affirm that being autistic isn't about falling short. It's about being a perfectly good version of ourselves. This declaration of identity champions the idea that we're not here to fit a mould, but to embrace and celebrate the uniqueness of the autistic experience. Which is basically saying, I am not a failed neurotypical, I'm a perfectly good autistic person. And that's shared by Neurobears. What's people's thoughts on this?
This is crucial, isn't it? This is what we're all trying to say. That our neurodivergent difference from the norm is not broken. It's unfair. Other people have written a rule book. And everything we can do to affirm ourselves as a perfectly good example of humanity, and everything we can do to advocate to help other people find themselves as a perfectly good example of advocacy is a valuable contribution, not just to ourselves as the autistic community, but the whole of society. So I'm with what Pandas Online has written there. Yes, wholeheartedly.
I'd just like to say that failure is opportunity. Anytime you fall into a negative space or meet resistance, there is an opportunity there for you to use that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I relate to this quite personally as well. I remember a friend actually said that to me, that I needed to stop seeing myself as a failed neurotypical. And that's been I guess the journey that I've been on over these past, goodness, I can't even count in my head right quickly on how many years it's been that I've suspected, and then this year, was it this year? Last year it was confirmed that I am autistic, and it really, I thought a lot of my autistic traits had always been the story that had been accepted by me and by people around me, that I was just crazy. It's a very sort of stigmatizing explanation for my struggles, and understanding the way that my brain works has brought me so much dignity, so much dignity back into my life. Oh, not back, but into my life, because I know how to look after myself and find ways to thrive and recognize safe people and places, to safe enough people and places for me to kind of connect and build with other people.
The thing about people is everybody's different anyway. But many people, including autistic people, have been made to feel by the society that we live in to be failures or to be broken, because you don't fit into a so-called fantasy mould that's been created of this average person that people or these statistics tend to throw up at you. And it did take me a long time. I mean, I was diagnosed when I was 17, but I was diagnosed, and the way the diagnosis went about it was through health issues. So the autistic identity was a medical diagnosis, and it was called Asperger's syndrome. So I felt for a long time there was something wrong, that there was something wrong with my brain, or something not right, abnormality, whatever you want to call it. And it's taken me a long time, but I finally can say that I do not feel like a failure anymore. I'm fairly content with my life and my being. Good days and bad days, of course, like everyone has. And it's just, it'd be good if a lot more people could be not encouraged but supported to feel that way, because there's so many people out there who have been made to feel like failures because they can't do something, or because they choose not to do something, or they feel that the sensitivities they've got prevents them from doing something. So people look at upon that as a failing, even though it's not. So it's how words are said, it's how things are put across, and how people are made to feel, and how people should be feeling within themselves, and having that choice to do so. And it's true what Raymond says, failure in what, in whose terms? I mean, whose terms is it that you're a failure? Just basically the so-called normal person that people are supposed to be but nobody actually is. It's a strange one.
There seems to be this thing about wanting to fit in. I've seen it in the autistic community over the past year or two, that there is this need, it's almost conditioned into us to work with the system. And of course, it's everywhere. So, in a sense, you have to. But I would say do it on your own terms, not on their terms, because that way you're just going to struggle. Whereas if you can identify yourself and work with it, take these resistances and problems and failures, there are opportunities and solutions within those things, those experiences. It's just don't beat yourself up about it. And don't keep trying to fit in to this thing that is so uncomfortable.
I'd like to put my experience in here, and I want people to think of it not as me in any way bigging myself up or bragging, because unlike a lot of autistic people, I have never felt broken. That is a real privilege and a real advantage. You know, being white, being male, being from the Northern Hemisphere is such a privileged position. And I have to say, in my adolescence, I realised that it was everybody else, however arrogant that might seem. Now, the reason I say this is to normalise us. If the rest of society has pushed you into this situation where you feel you have to fit in, then that's external to you. That's been put upon you. Because you can compare yourself to me, where I haven't been forced into that. I've been so fortunate. And you can say, it can't just be the autism. You're not broken. It's what's forced upon you that's the wrong.
The next post is from the Autistic Tiger, who's an artist, a rising creator. Tiger Velic is an 11-year-old autistic savant artist. He is the creator of the Autistic Tiger, an alter ego. And what he shared is a quote. I don't mind being alone. What I mind is feeling alone in a room full of people who ignore me. What's people's thoughts on this? The reason I shared this one is sometimes, or even a lot of times, is people saying, or society or the media, whatever, the thing of being alone is seen as a negative. But I like being alone. I think being alone is very positive. I think being alone gives respite. I live alone, and I've lived alone for nearly 24 years. And for the most, it's been a great experience, because when I go out and deal with life in itself, dealing with other people, even going out and socialising, all the good stuff, I still feel privileged that I can go back to a house where I can, relax and recover. Yep, as you say, sanctuary, from all the senses and all that I've been going through, and it just to recover is probably a negative. It's just recover just means like you being tired, just or doing good things or whatever, mental tiredness or whatever. But yeah, as Raymond just put down, alone is not lonely, and that's what I'm basically saying just now. Is I obviously I do get lonely, but being alone isn't always about being lonely. Being alone feels very good at times. But the other thing is you can feel alone being around other people. If the other people are ignorant of you, or it's a crowd, or you're within a crowd, or within an atmosphere which is very negative, intense, and judgmental. So I think that's what this post is trying to say.
Yeah, you can be lonely in a crowd. What was I thinking about there? I'll go leave it for someone else. I've lost it. Yeah, it was that thing I sort of said earlier about, oh no, it's going again. See, when something's really great, you can never remember it. It's like you're always connected, even when you feel disconnected. Disconnection is a form of connection, if you know what I mean. So, loneliness is a form of companionship. It's this expectation of some, not quite fantasy, but, the idea of relating, and it feeling like you're not relating and you're not getting that feedback or whatever you seek from it. But in a sense, you are always a part of that. It's just that you're a bit removed from it currently when you're feeling that way.
I don't quite understand what you're saying there, Raymond, but I'm going to work on it so I can understand. For me, I think if you're in a room where other people are not connecting with you and it feels as though they're excluding you, that is the issue. That feels like an aggression, and moving outside those spaces is the only way I deal with that. If I'm in a space where I look around and I see just that quick, thin slice judgment that means that people don't really want me there or aren't connecting with me, I leave it. And being alone and happy with that is lovely. It is a lovely space. But we do need human connection, however much we feel we are different from the rest of the population. We do need connection with other people. So for me, I would say the meaning of this post is to say find your connection where people want to connect, and that's amongst the autistic community.
The next post is from Neurodivergent Rebel. Public figure. Name is Lyric Riviere. They, them. Gender fluid, pansexual, polyamorous and multiply neurodivergent. Educator, artist and best-selling author of Workplace Neurodiversity Rising. And what they've shared is a quote, their own quote. And what they're saying is, pushing for autistic assimilation isn't advocating for autistic rights. The reason I've shared this is that I'm not entirely sure what it actually means. Does anybody else know what this is referring to?
Well, this is where we need some dialogue with the person. We need to ask them, what exactly do they mean? I mean, it's a very tight little statement, and it sounds like just like how it reads, that autistic assimilation, which is autistics joining in with the rest of society, supposedly. I think that's what's being intimated. Joining in with the rest of society is not really preserving the rights of autistic people.
I think the word assimilation means to not just be included, but to be made the same as. It means to be brought into the fold and made to conform. And we don't want that. We don't want to be tolerated or accepted. We need to be understood, if that's possible. But if we're not understood, we need to be respected as different. Just trying to make us the same as everybody else in some kind of assimilation is really to deny what we are as a nature, and what we are as a nature is perfectly good as it is.
Right. You're absolutely right. I was actually wondering what the word assimilation was, if that's what it actually meant. So it does mean basically to conform and try and be like everybody else. It's a strange thing, that, because everybody's different anyway. And I mean everybody. Not just autistic. I mean, autistic people are different from each other. I mean, we're all different from each other. And it's very obvious we're different from each other, different personalities, different experiences, etc. Which is good, and that demonstrates, it breaks down the stereotype. So I totally agree with everything's been said, is I do not want to change my way to fit in, because the way that I am isn't harming anyone. It's my right to be who I want to be. And denying myself and denying my identity is a dangerous thing anyway. And it's a dangerous thing to ask from anybody, is to deny who they are by nature. So I totally agree with what the Neurodivergent Rebels actually said there. I totally agree with that. It's certainly not advocacy. It's certainly not something that I would be happy with. And it's disappointing that that sort of approach is actually being made, somewhere in the world.
Well, the word has meanings from the past. They used to try to assimilate different cultures. They used to talk about assimilating black people from Africa into society, and it really meant asking them to leave their culture behind and becoming the same as everybody else. I did a quick internet search, and it described it as the process by which a minority group or culture adopts the values, behaviours and beliefs of the majority group. This can happen fully or partially. It can also be voluntary or forced. So it really goes back to the other thing about being proud of who we are as a culture and as a minority group, rather than being broken members of the majority group, which is how so often we are expected to view ourselves.
I don't know how well I'm going to be able to articulate this, but I'll give it a go. It's making me think a little bit of what little I understand from a short time that I lived in New Zealand, of how the Maori people have ended up becoming like a bit of a blueprint for like Indigenous people's rights, and how they they were able to kind of say, well, if you're going to be building hospitals and schools on our land, then we want our young people to be able to access the same opportunities as like the Pakeha, like white people over there. And that when I was over there, there was mentorship programs for Maori lawyers would they would mentor other, like they would mentor Maori youth to help to kind of help them being able to access law school, things like that as well, different placements. And but they had the land rights as almost like a leverage, so that they were able to protect their own culture and also access like the same rights as other people have, when it came to like resources and like knowledge and skills too. So I think that's where autistic people as a minority, we're in, like obviously we're in a completely different situation than the Maori people, but it's that tension of how do we leverage our rights to our own, yeah, how do we leverage our rights in a society that might or might not feel like having a platform for a certain minority.
We have to identify what our empowerment is, what our sense of power is. That's a difficult one and quite complex, but simply put, we just have to identify our relationship with power.
Here's where we have to develop our telekinesis.
The next post is from Asking Autistics, which is an autistic podcast by autistic people. And what it's talking about is a quote it shared saying that autistic people are too sensitive. Meanwhile, here's a list of things that offend autistic people: not making eye contact, wanting to be left alone, not wanting to take part in a conversation, using the wrong tone, showing the wrong amount of excitement, pointing instead of using words, not wanting to be touched, not wanting to eat certain foods, wearing earplugs around other people, stimming in a way that does not affect anyone else, not following traditions, and questioning their authority. So basically it's saying, who are the sensitive ones? What's other people's thoughts?
think this might vary according to different autistic experiences. People like myself might not get a lot of negative reaction, whereas others probably do. So I have to bear that in mind when I'm pondering this one.
Yeah, the not making eye contact one, I was made to, yeah, I was made to apologize to somebody years ago before I knew I was autistic because I'd have offended them by not looking at them when I met them. Um, and I had at the time I was just so mortified that my behaviour had been so rude, and because I had meant absolutely there was no meaning, and it was, yeah, I remember feeling really small and then having to try and kind of like, I don't think I made eye contact with him, but I think I'd like would make an effort to like greet him by name or something, wanting to be left alone. I've offended a lot of people by that. Yeah, not wanting to take part in a conversation frequently in my past, using the wrong tone. Yeah, I think that can be one that I have been guilty of. And also, I find it hard to interpret tone in other people. So I can just find it confusing, and then asking directly can seem confrontational to people. But I wonder if this is more to do with how women are expected to behave. I find as I get older, I care less. And I've realised as well that people will just leave me alone if I do growl at them a little bit. And so I don't have to put up with this as much. But as a young woman, I found it really difficult to navigate. Not wanting to be touched hugely, and when traveling in France, oh my goodness, it was agony. And I remember the first time I wore earplugs around my children, I felt so guilty. And then it took me a while to shed that because it was so ingrained in me that kind of this kind of neurotypical standard. And I've got a lot of memories that have been coming back about being punished for stimming as well. So it's a question in their authority. I don't, yeah, that's sometimes just asking a question about how things are meant to be done, being interpreted as insubordination. This is definitely something that I experienced a lot growing up. And I do expect might be familiar to other women.
I really thank you for that, Nicola, because I think that was beautifully expressed, and it's lovely that you point out the differences between how women are expected to be in society. I have missed out on some of the comments that Justin has been putting in a different space on Podbean there, and I apologise to Justin, but there is a significant delay on what's happening here. But I'm going to go back because they make sense in general. He says that he totally agrees with what Harry was saying, and that everybody is different from each other, including autistic people from each other. And we all come from different walks of life. So what the posters are saying, he says, it's understandable. And this phrase particularly I like from what Justin says. He says, asking autistics, exclamation mark.
I mean, the post is very relatable because the autistic way seems to offend a lot of people, but then they seem to be offended by more of what an autistic person does or what I've done. Like, I've said this before. When I'm happy, I get louder. Sometimes I shout. I don't mean to shout. I just like I'm happy, and it's like oh, and that seems to give people a fright. And it's like oh, calm down. What's going on? It's like I'm happy. And I can remember that actually happening in my surprise 40th birthday party. And I was a bit shouty and happy because it was just it was a great, it wasn't something I was expecting. It was down my mum and dad's house, it's just down the road from me. And it was, and some of the family were there. It's just the way they organised it and everybody was there, which is not what usually happens because someone's always unavailable because of different, siblings are doing different things, working and other responsibilities. So I was kind of shouty and all that day, and I get pulled up a couple of times. Not like what you're doing is bad, but it was like, calm down. Which is a strange thing because they surprised me with a barbecue to mark my 40th birthday, which I never thought I was going to have, and I wasn't actually bothered having, and it was just after, the COVID lockdown. So it was like a big, nice, positive surprise, but because the way that was kind of bringing my happiness out, it seemed to give one or two people a fright, like, oh, calm down, sort of thing. It didn't happen too often. I'm kind of making it sound like I was put up about, a lots of times. I wasn't. It was like one or two. And it just sticks in my mind because it's like, this is how I act as I'm happy. I'm not going to jump about or anything. I'm just being a bit louder. And it's things like that wind you up because people get offended if, be you doing something, but then they're annoyed if you're sensitive to what they do. And what they do is generally, I don't want to say worse, but can be more impactful.
I want to bring in what Robbie Prosser says over on Facebook. The whole problem throughout my life has been attempts to force me to fit in. Where I'm accepted as who I am, I have no problems. And I frequently get in trouble for questioning authority. Everything there that Robbie's saying fits with what people are posting. That bit at the end about authority, and picking up on what Nicola said, if we question for clarification, often hierarchies look at that as insubordination and a questioning of authority. Well, fuck 'em.
The next post is from Autism Support Community, who's a blogger. Late diagnosed autistic, ADHD, 2 sons, writer, blogger, public talks, autism, mental health, bullying. What I've shared is about school. When school becomes a source of trauma for neurodivergent children, it not only disrupts their academic aspirations, but also burdens them with feelings of inadequacy, impacting their mental health and sense of belonging. And what was added is, this is so true, it took me decades to undo the damage school did to me. What's people's thoughts on this? What I relate to it, thinking back at school, and the environment, the culture, the stress, and how it's the same sort of thing about the authority and to conform, to behave, to do things a certain way, to wear a uniform, to get good grades. And if you don't get good grades according to the school, according to this education system, you fail. You're a failure. Now, as time goes on, you realise that's not the case, but that's the sort of thing that they put across you in school, particularly secondary school. And considering the kind of change of life that you're going through while you're in secondary school, between the ages of 12 and 16, sometimes up to 18, and you're autistic as well, it can do a lot of damage and has done a lot of damage to a lot of people. And even people as adults are still recovering from what they feel is damage being done to them. And I must say that in many ways I still feel that. I left school over 20 years ago. Longer than that, actually. But it's been a considerable amount of time, and I still feel parts of what the school environment did to me and how it affected me, and has been obviously lifelong.
I feel like the idea of, if I try and imagine having to go into a classroom of 30 people every day, that would be just an absolute nightmare. And that in itself just made school so made school so difficult for me. And I recognise that for my children as well. And I just, when somebody mentioned the school uniform thing as well, I hated as a pupil school uniform, and as an adult I still feel a bit the same about it. I just feel like we have no choice but to be there, and or send our kids there, or unless we're resourced enough to have alternatives. Yeah, and they're told what they have to wear to go there. That just seems a step too far. If you're going to be compelling me to do something, at least let me show up in a way that I'm comfy.
Yeah, I could well agree with that. I actually do remember when I was in school, it's partially sort of related, there was a campaign by the girls of not needing or having the choice to not wear a skirt because they felt they wanted to wear trousers. I mean, it sounds actually ridiculous talking about it, but back then it was school uniform, and the girls had to wear a skirt, and not all girls were comfortable wearing that. So there was actually a campaign, and I think it was successful eventually. Can't remember the timeline of it. I just have this memory of this happening. It's like they want to wear something that they're comfortable in. I mean, they're wearing a uniform anyway, so why don't you just let them wear trousers if they're more comfortable in that, rather than wearing skirts? And it just shows you the kind of attitude that was towards girls at the time.
I'm just going to try an experiment. I hope the sound doesn't go to hell. Robbie Prosser has put up here: I questioned why a minimum age for the day centre could not be changed. The service could have easily met my needs. So this is questioning authority again. School set me up to fail. By the time I got to college, it was too late. And then a number of bad jobs after that did damage. I was bullied by children and teachers. And for him, he says that school is more about compliance than it is about education.
Well, that certainly is relatable. And as I've said before, I mean, I do feel that I have been educated. And I've got at least a basic education, if not more. But yeah, in schools about compliance, you know, how you should behave, how you should dress, how you should be, basically. And if you behave in a certain way, you're looked as abnormal and you're either shunned or you're pulled up for it. I mean, I was in trouble a lot in school. You know, there's a lot of things I was doing wrong, don't get me wrong, but you had guidance teachers and things like that, but there was never seemed to be any much guidance, to be fairly honest. I actually remember going to a guidance teacher to tell them that I was getting bullied, I was getting picked on. And I think they told somebody. And then it was somebody that was on my school bus, and then I got a hell of a hassle for grassing them up. I'm going, how the hell did they know that? Did they tell them, or did I make it too obvious? But I think they actually told them. They did tell them because they get pulled up for it. And then they tell them who actually said to them, because, I mean, maybe I'm being unfair here. I'm just kind of giving a kind of running commentary and a kind of flowing memory. But go back to what school is, yep, compliance and behave a certain way. And it's certainly school, as I said before, I'm hoping it's school that I remember no longer exists and it's a lot better today than it was then.
I honestly feel like it generally is, and there's good policies there, but there's times that I've come across people, and my intuition just kind of goes off because I feel like there's definitely some people who have certain beliefs about autism and autism diagnosis and parenting and things like that. And there's little dog whistles, little tells that I found that I can spot, and it's this. There's a bit of dismay when I'm like, oh, somebody with this kind of underlying attitude or underlying belief. But then I guess it's just meaning that the people who do care and are about inclusion and, like, you know, access to educate, really really about that, those people shine out as well.
The next post is from Autism in Scotland, AIS. Community page. Autism in Scotland is an info page and forum group on Facebook which provides peer-to-peer support. And it's a post marking 15 years. And it says, I started Autism in Scotland 15 years ago today. Initially, this began as a way of getting support as I am a parent to 3 autistic girls who were diagnosed using diagnostic tools designed for boys. The information I was given was non-existent. The information I was given was non-existent, and I was horrified there was no support, and apparently very few autistic girls out there. AIS quickly became the first Scotland-wide peer-to-peer support group on Facebook and grew to over 4,200 strong. So 15 years later, I am delighted AIS is still here, but it is tinged with sadness for me. I have lost my enthusiasm a little. When Lindsay, who joined me to help running AIS a few years after I started, died unexpectedly in August, it shook me to the core, and I'm still finding it hard. Thanks for supporting each other and me for 15 years. Teresa. This was shared as part of a kind of milestone celebration. Sometimes milestones is talking about how many followers or likes a page has. On sometimes like this one marking an anniversary, like a year anniversary or 15 years anniversary of something, something being formed, something being founded. And the journey from there to here. And it's nice to share these sort of things because 15 years is a long time for something to run, and it's something that I always aspire to. If I start something, or at least if I get involved in something, including Autistic Radio, is the longevity of how long I'm going to be involved and the journey that will take me and the progress that I aspire for it to make. And it's good to see that sort of thing being celebrated. And of course, some journeys are tinged with sadness because sometimes we lose people along the way. And it's just something I feel was just worth sharing. The next post is from Autistic and Living the Dream, a personal blog from a PhD student, researcher, speaker and trainer, they, them, based in the UK. And they've shared a quote from Adam JK. And it says, "It's so easy to just let people live. All you need to do is love yourself enough to not be threatened by other people's joy." Doesn't that sound familiar? What's other people's thoughts?
Yeah, it feels like it's picking up on what we were talking about at the 444 about doing things for out of intrinsic motivation. That's what I was taking from what we were saying earlier, rather than looking for external validation and validating yourself, all of that good stuff. For me, it's been a huge part of my recovery is moving out of that codependent space where I felt that I had to sort of serve others and be relevant because I was of use and all of that stuff. And now I'm like living my life from my own center, and I don't, yeah, like, and when I say that, I mean I'm living it from my own perspective. I'm honoring my own perspective and feelings and needs, and not expecting that if I'm a good enough person who tries to meet everyone else's needs, that they'll somehow meet mine. I'm taking responsibility for my own life, my own experience, and my life's getting better because I'm putting that effort in. And yeah, I'm much, much less concerned about what other people are doing and how they're living their lives because they're making their choices and I'm making mine.
There can be a difficult moment or experience where you're wanting to be a part of something with people and they're kind of happy together, but not with you. It's not that they exclude you in a sense, it's just you can't fit in again. Somehow you just can't join in with this it's almost like when it's three's a crowd.
I like little maxims, and one that I like for that is rejection is protection. And that's helped me to kind of move on and go where I find myself welcome and wanted, because those are productive, cool, creative spaces.
Yes, I'm reminded of a wee pop culture reference here, like when Bob Dylan turned religious and he released a song called Gotta Serve Somebody. John Lennon heard it and did a spoof version, and he says, serve yourself.
There's there was something I was thinking about recently, and when I had to make this choice, the shift to taking care of myself, and it was quite hard for me to do. I felt very, very guilty, um, because it meant letting go of being of service to somebody who really didn't want that to change. And it was a quote by from that I'd read it, that apparently the Buddha had said that you can search the whole universe and you'll not find anybody more worthy of your own compassion than yourself. And I at the time, like, that kind of helped me to kind of be compassionate towards myself. Go, it's my responsibility to keep this organism that is me alive. But now it's like I started to look at it a wee bit differently, and it was how, like, I actually don't think we can truly be compassionate to anybody else beyond the compassion that we offer ourselves. So it feels that there's a paradox in that if we can be a wee bit selfish, we actually can be a bit more compassionate to others.
Well, if we're all one, and that's debatable, but I kind of go for it. If you're looking after yourself, you're looking after everyone else at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. It's like self love as well. If you don't love yourself or don't like yourself, how do you expect other people to do that? Um, and it's the same as looking after yourself and respecting yourself. How do you expect others to do that if you don't do it yourself? All starts with you. And I've got a habit of feeling bad for feeling good. It's like this kind of guilt is, why am I feeling so good? Because, I should be feeling, it's like you should not be feeling positive all the time. And I don't anyway, but see, if you feel positive too long, it's like, this isn't fair. Like, I don't know why I do that. It's maybe autistic, maybe not. But I've kind of taught myself is just enjoy the good moments. Just be, enjoy the moments, enjoy your hobbies, enjoy the good times with yourself, and be compassionate to yourself. Think of yourself, look after yourself, and you're right. If you do all that within yourself, you learn, or you automatically just do it for others anyway, because you know what it's like to feel bad, and you know what it's like to feel good because you've kind of been good to yourself. So if you're good to others, I don't put it simplistic, but it's a good thing. What it does is it makes you realise that you feel, and you feel human, and you feel part of humanity, and it's it's an interesting one. I mean, the post itself, I mean, it says it's easy to let people live, but as we know, a lot of times people won't let others live. It's like there's judgments, there's like prejudices, there's just like people don't want to see other people having joy. So you're up against that a lot of the time sometimes. So yep, it's something to be inspired by. It's within yourself and with others.
Harry, I was just thinking when you were talking, if the people who'd been mumping at you for being too loud when you were happy at your birthday had taken responsibility for their own needs, they'd have just put their little earplugs in or wore some ear defenders and let you enjoy yourself. And I guess in a way, when we do take care of our own needs, we do make more space for other people too.
I totally agree with you on that. That's, that's actually a nice thought, thinking that. Yeah, well, I think I'm too loud. Here my headphones. They work. They work for me.
Yeah, if they have another surprise party, make sure somebody supplies them.
It's like fitting in on your terms. See, all people want is for you to fit in with them, but fit in on your terms. I think that's why comedians do so well. They just learn a way to fit in, but on their terms.
I've got a friend who said to me that you could, if you just said that you were an artist, if you're autistic, but you just changed one letter and said you were an artist, you'd probably be able to get as much accommodation as you would, or maybe even more, by saying that you're an autist.
Yeah, people go just as blank.
That amuses me because whenever I'm travelling, just the way I act and the way I look and the way I wear a hat and that kind of things, people ask me, "Are you an artist?" And I say, "Yes, I'm autistic," and it starts a conversation.
And here it's me thinking you were the invisible man when you travelled.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think I'm both. I know that's odd, but there are certain situations where you cannot be anything but a complete spectacle. I mean, where I am at the moment, I am entirely the only white face for I don't know how many miles. I walk down the street and it's a spectacle. Fortunately, I have a lot of experience of dealing with these kind of things, and I'm relatively comfortable. But there's something that you've just said there in a text that makes it true as well. You said, so obvious that you are invisible. And in plain sight, sometimes you can be so outlandish that people will just accept you as part of the surroundings and see you as so other that you're no longer a threat in some ways. You're just so other, you know. I can't express it. I don't get it.
I'm really curious if the teenage experience of realizing if you dress all in black and look really gothic or punky or something, that you become so other that people leave you alone, treat you accordingly. It's almost like a camouflage. My experience of that with my friends, it was like if we look strange, they almost won't realize that we are strange and they'll just leave us alone.
Yeah,
I'm reminded
it's
of an
something
old
about.
phrase. You first, Jules.
Why no, sir. After you.
I'm just going to say something trivial, like I'm reminded of that old phrase that used to get bandied around. Oh, you're one of them.
one of them. One of them. Yes, I am one of them. Whatever them is to you, I am one of them. I own it. I am outside you. But it's something about what you said. If you're so outside, you're no longer a threat. It is a status, as you put in the text. It's like you're taking control of it.
Exactly. And you're not even taking control of it.
That is very wise, because you're not wanting control. You know, all you're doing is removing the control that other people try to put on you, because they can't make you conform to the degree, and then suddenly they accept it.
The next post is from Autistic Knowledge Development, CIC. And they're saying, thanks for the team at Health and Social Care Alliance Scotland for including us in their Connected Communities case studies. And I'm going to actually read that particular study. It's not too long, but it's interesting. So it says, Autistic Knowledge Development is an autism think tank, led entirely by autistic people, working to improve the life opportunities of autistic people. They have big ideas and are working on innovative new projects. Both Leila and Sean, the drivers behind Autistic Knowledge Development, strongly believe it's not about us without us. And their general premise is to bring more autistic people to the forefront of anything that is related to them. Sean remarks that if a project aimed at women was entirely designed and delivered by men, no matter how well intentioned it was, people would quite rightly have something to say about it. But somehow, he says, it's okay in the autism sector. We need to remove the misconception that the only reason they are at the table is because they're autistic. It's not about finding any autistic person and making them a CEO. It's about finding the right people who are incredibly talented but have reached unfair blockages and opening the door for them and enabling them to apply their wealth of knowledge and experience through an autistic lens. To do this, they aim to create partnerships where at all possible and are fully integrated with the people they work with. All of the work they do is developed in conjunction with and led by the community they support, and they are very clear that their work is all iterative. Nothing we do is ever finished, and action research is embedded in everything we do. The community ranges from children and young people to people in their 70s, and all they want to know is, has the support they have provided made a difference to how they feel about being autistic? They can't change being autistic, and they wouldn't even if they could, but they can change how people feel about it. Sean quoted that less than a quarter of autistic people are employed, but almost 3/4 of the autistic community want to be. And this has a huge impact on their mental health. Prior to accessing their support service, which runs across Scotland in partnership with National Autistic Society Scotland, 1 in 4 people felt they had nothing to offer society. But this dropped to 1 in 10 following the programme. Sean and Leila both believe that being born autistic shouldn't mean that you automatically are signed up to a lifetime of clinical anxiety and depression. They can evidence that people feel better about being autistic if you help them find a sense of purpose and show them what they have to offer society, and this can help tackle depression and anxiety in people that are autistic. The best thing they are doing is growing a community in a safe place, providing the opportunity for people to make connections, to build and to grow and have conversations. They are building what they call a silent scaffolding around the people they work with, giving them a structure to rely on if they hit a problem or need advice. Sean says that he's had to learn a degree of tolerance for how the system currently is, but it's better to be in the tent than outside shouting into the darkness. They are asking organisations to work with them to ensure things are different for those that come after them. The training they deliver has been designed and is facilitated by autistic people, and through this they want to set a standard of best practice, work with organisations to shift the power dynamic and ask them to consider reasonable adjustments in their employment structure. But they know that no one organisation can stand as an island on its own, and they think it would be brilliant if organisations across Scotland collaborated and shared more. Leila says evidence-based learning should be shared. If you know something works, why should someone have to go through the hassle of trying to figure it out when you have it there? If only there was the ability to share projects that work so that people that can replicate them. Like, train the trainer. They work closely with the Scottish Government policy team and Self-Directed Support Scotland, but they would welcome more relationships. They are always open to any organisation willing to evaluate and change. They want everyone to feel comfortable enough to make mistakes and say the wrong thing, because they believe that everyone's too nervous to say or do anything, then nothing changes. As Leila says, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. There is change needed, but it doesn't have to be drastic. It just has to be the best practice. The work autism knowledge development are doing to support the autism community is based on changing the experience of autistic people in 10 or 15 years from now. Leila says we're trying to leave a bit of a legacy for future generations so that they can understand that they're autistic, or they actually get an autism diagnosis, they land in a safer place, and they have more resources specifically from Autistic Voices to be able to support them, and they see being autistic in a more positive way. I know it's a bit long-winded, but I thought it was very important to share that. It's nice and positive and very educating.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Harry, because what they're doing is revolutionary, and it is part of a paradigm shift, and it's disrupting. Autistic Knowledge Development was part of a group of different organisations that got the opportunity to get some funding to create supports for our group, the late diagnosed and typically older adults. Almost exclusively, the rest of those organisations were the usual suspects. And the usual suspects fucked it up. They fucked it up big time. They took people in and they gave them little bits of information and then left them to go and deal with it. It was damaging. You're supposed to do no harm. But what the status quo organisations did, I think, was harmful to the people involved, leaving them without ongoing opportunities for support can lead people towards really desperate decisions. I support Autistic Knowledge Development, and I can see myself supporting them for a long time. We've made podcasts with them. I've been to the Scottish Parliament to speak at support directly to ministers, and in return also Autistic Knowledge Development is one of those autistic groups that tries to lift everybody else up as well. So they have networked us into little parts of the system. So usually when you read this kind of stuff, it's washing. It's neurodiversity washing. But in this case, I would say it was genuine, and I wish Sean and Lila the absolute best.
Same. I really, really appreciate their work, and it's thanks to them that I'm here chatting with you right now. They really are connecting people and lifting people up, and helping us with opportunities and access to opportunities that are out there. So it's like the real deal.
In contrast, I can say that Ray and I met in a different course, and it was one of the other almost as good courses, but I've never heard from them since. And in fact, I've constantly tried to involve them in what we're doing here, so that I can help them to help more, but they're not coming to the mark. And that's the organisation that runs the main support service in our capital, Edinburgh. It runs number 6, the name of which actually escapes me at the moment.
I think the fact that they are opening up a space, and they gave that space to 19 people when I was in attendance this week, to voice themselves, to speak out as themselves in that kind of safe space. That was what I found quite overwhelming, because the numbers, the pressure and the intimidation almost of those numbers as well, to be present amongst it all. But I just sat back and went on mute because I was listening to all these other people, and it was a sharing experience in that sense. So, which kind of ties in with things I've been saying earlier about when you can merge with your environment. It's not about you. You're not primary anymore. It's the experience. And so I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks. What was good about the one we attended was that it was fewer numbers, and so we did kind of, I wouldn't say hog it, but we were able to get points over quite regularly and easily because there was a lot of airspace, if you see what I mean. It was freer in that sense. But this is a different experience now, and I'm sort of waiting to see how it all pans out. And of course, as you referred to, there's probably a lot more post availability and affordance after the 6 weeks, which means the community can stay in touch.
Yeah, I would say 19 people at a meeting is inappropriate, and there's a sense where they are they're suffering under their own popularity. I'm sure that should be adjusted over time. Yeah.
It did mean that it got quite busy, even in the text. I hardly even used the text. I used the text to introduce myself, and that was it. Because the text began to be a place where others were they were developing conversations with each other as a sideline from people talking on the visual. But people seemed fairly comfortable with it and very open to it, and unstoppable almost once they got going.
I think what we'll do, Raymond, is we'll use your experience where you can compare the two things to be helpful and to say what could be adjusted. Because the other thing that they are open to is adjusting things as they go along. Usually the problem is that they are asked to do too much. They are often set up to fail because they are forced into a situation where they're told, well, if you can do it better, go ahead, and here's 100 people, you know?
Yeah, as I just typed there, I'm no authority on these things. I'm me, one autistic person, one point of view, one perspective.
Yeah, I feel terrible that I said Leela rather than Lila, because Lila does sound familiar, so small mistake while I was reading it out, but I actually enjoyed reading that out, and I actually read that out, while I was reading the whole thing for the first time. And it's just this positive, revolutionary, progressive sort of nature of what they're looking to do, what they're aspiring to do, which was very empowering just to read and read aloud, because there's just so much frustration with the status quo and the past. I think there's more anger at the past, but there's certainly frustration at the status quo. Organisations that say that they're progressive, but they're really not. What they are is they're basically making a living out of autism. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because people, they've got a right to make a living. But it's like that's the priority. And a lot of these things that are started, like groups and get togethers and things that are one to one or within a group, which is promoted as helpful, are always very short term. It's like they give you 6 weeks or 9 weeks, or if you're lucky, maybe even a year or an academic year or whatever, and then it ends. Then you might get a wee booklet or a link to a website where you can get more help or go somewhere else. But see, if you connecting with someone as a person, connecting with people, connecting with a group, a community, and then it's taken away from you, and then you need to start from scratch on your own to create a community or look for something similar. It's quite damaging for a lot of people, because people feel that they've been given something only for it to be taken away. Even if they say at the beginning that this isn't going to be on, this isn't long term, it still gives you that sort of feeling that you're getting something, you get used to something, and then you're out in the dark again. So I'm just glad that this has got a more long term aspiration about it.
Over on Podbeam, Justin is saying, absolutely, exclamation mark, exactly, Harry, exclamation mark, status quo, I know, yes.
I liked a bit in the post as well when it talked about how the goal was, so so that people could know that we don't have to live a lifetime of like crippling depression and anxiety just because we're autistic. And like when I did the Embrace Autism course, it was something that really like shone through in that it was they were able to really help sort of identify how we can get stuck, just thinking that that's just, oh well, this is just how life is, when things can get a lot better.
Just out of interest, Nicola, how many were on your sessions?
It wasn't as busy as that. I can't remember, but I remember it not being that many.
Actually, I'm in contact with both of them, so I'm going to feed this back.
Well, thanks everybody. That's just our time. Just about. Oh, only 3 minutes to go. Thanks everybody for sharing conversations, the discussions, and all in a positive way. Even though we went through quite hard-hitting topics, as we generally do, but we looked to end on a positive note. It's certainly progressive. So thank you again, and thank you, special thanks to the people that share these posts for us to share, because without them there wouldn't be this show and there would be anything to talk about. And it's amazing how I gradually, not thinking about it, put a theme across the days before we have these Facebook discussions. There seems to be this kind of natural occurring theme from the posts that are shared subconsciously. So this is Harry's Facebook. This is part of the 555 Spectrum Voices Conversation, which is 5:55 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. UK time, and 12:55 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, United States. So this is the end of the show, and I'll hand it over to Jules.
Thanks, Harry. This is the part of the show where we talk about the charity, Autistic Association, that supports Autistic Radio. This week I have big news.